Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is bonus episode number 40, and I have with me today a bit of a Renaissance man, a storyteller, Thorsten Nesch. Hello, Thorsten. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great. Hi.
Great. Good to have you on. And Thorsten is currently working on a novel, and we'll get into that. But looking at your resume, you've got quite a storied career. So I'd like you to let the audience know the iceberg tip of everything that you've done so far.
Yeah. So I see myself as a storyteller and obviously a bilingual in German and English. And the way it was that I always used what I had what I could get my hands on. So writing was definitely first. I started writing when I was like around 15, I would say.
Okay.
And those were short stories and they grew into novels.
Right. And was that something that you just came naturally, or was there any, like, were your parents creative as well, or?
No, not at all. I'm really from a blue collar background. Nobody was into arts. Nobody was self-employed. All these things. I'm the first one in my family past 9th grade.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Right.
So, but I could read whatever I wanted to, like I was I guess a quiet kid, and I read early a lot.
Okay. And what kind of reading did you like?
I always have to start with comics because I read them before I even could read. So before I went to school, my uncle was an avid comic reader. And he always threw me those comics, and those were like superhero comics, and it was above my age. If you know Asterix and Obelix, as for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm familiar with them. Yes.
I have those baby doodles. When you give a 1-year-old a pen and they just do donuts.
Right.
I had that in the comics, so that was I always loved them, and then I kind of graduated right away to pulp fiction novels, you would say. I kind of jumped I jumped over the young adult fiction.
Okay.
And from then, of course, I have to mention, because into pulp fiction there was horror, and then there was this advertisement page about Stephen King, right? And then I was hooked.
Okay. And what was the first King book that you read?
Christine.
You remember?
Oh, Christine. I sure remember my first novel. As a young, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13 I was, and there was no going back to pulp fiction after that. And,
right. Okay. So you had just a natural aptitude for reading and writing, and did that influence your education? What types of courses you took and whatnot?
Yeah, it's funny. So I finished high school, and my problem at that point was already that, I guess, like writing and literature and all this, I couldn't picture myself in university, and I had still to write what any professor or teacher wants to hear. I have a very free approach to literature, and that was the only thing. I had to do that for 13 years in my high school, 14 because I had to repeat the 7th. So that was a situation I didn't want to be in, and I decided against studying literature or language arts and so on.
I can see from your resume here, you've done a lot of things. Like I see you were at street art, you did live performances, you did a 24-hour live novel performance. Span maps, which is, I've never heard of that. That's interesting. Urban electronic poetry. Drawing in a digital exhibition. You were a performing author, so you've done quite a few things here. I'm just going to pick up on a couple that I'm not really familiar with. The span maps. What's that?
Yeah, that goes really back into the early 90s, as far as I remember, and and I think the word spam mail just came up, like literally, right?
Okay.
So
right.
I because of a friend who was into computers, not me at the time, but he just gave me his computer and he hooked me up to the internet. And soon enough, I had an email address and I got spam mail. And in that, and I guess the filters weren't that good, right? And for me, it was almost like, oh, wow, this, very abstract lingo, even in English, right? From some foreign countries. And I kind of compiled them to an art project that I read out loud. And but that was like 94. Oh, okay. I forgot now. Yeah.
96, actually. But yeah.
So, and what apps. So.
Yeah, and that 24-hour live novel performance, what was that? Were you writing in front of an audience or something? Because I know like Harlan Ellison did that once in a bookstore window or something. Was this the same kind of idea?
I think it was more underground than a bookstore window because it was a defunct slaughterhouse.
Oh, okay.
Like a butchery, and it was. I think there were like 5 German cities involved, and we kind of faxed back then. We faxed the pages to the next city, and then they kept on writing, and you got the fax back. Yeah, no, it was quite wild. It was like in Cologne,
right? Yeah, very cool. And so what else have you got here? Man, oh man. And then later on when you got to Canada, I guess was around 18, 20, am I looking at the right timeline here?
Well, that's also a little chopped up. So the first time I came in 1998.
Okay.
So 1998 and then to 2003, 2004, we lived in Victoria, British Columbia. And then my wife and me, we moved back to Germany.
Okay.
For 10 years. And since 2014, we're in Lethbridge, Alberta.
Oh, okay. Okay. So am I right to say in your earlier creative period, you were exploring various types of media. And then as you've progressed to this point, you seem to be much more focused on fiction. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, you can pretty much say that. Like it came with a territory that, you're exposed as an underground writer, if you want, so to other media, to other artists. And that was wonderful. You do collaborations and you see about the possibilities of like independent arts. But at the end of the day, I want to tell a story, one way or the other. So, yeah.
And are you at the University of Lethbridge in some capacity then, or?
No, not at all. I'm
at
I work part-time at the CASA for the Allied Arts Council. The CASA is a place where it's a very artsy place, but also you can get hands-on woodshop and other things. Yeah.
Okay. And you've worked on some YA projects as well.
Yeah.
Is that your first, what was your first like structured type of writing? And I'm thinking like more traditional in terms of like either a novel or short stories or anything like that. When did that happen for you?
I think, like the short stories, they started, they started basically a week after I stopped playing with Lego and Playmobil, and it was a crazy time. I think I'm a late bloomer or a starter or whatever.
Sure.
Anyway, and so I was the last kid coming to school. So what did you do yesterday? And I'm like, I played with Playmobil, and exactly, right, like giggling, and it's like. I was like, oh my God, this goes away now, right? But I was reading already, right? So basically the next week I was like, and it was a horror story because I read through all Stephen King novels at that point anyway.
Right.
So it was a solid short story that I wrote per hand and gave it to my friends and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then it just basically it grew natural from then on. Yeah, and you mentioned the young adult fiction. Of course, I was like 22. You imagine yourself, at least more as a bohemian, in jazz clubs.
Okay.
So, but that didn't work out like professionally. But I had an idea that I carried around for 2 years, and I didn't tackle it, although I loved it. And then I had the idea, what if that happens to 15-year-olds? And all of a sudden, everything makes sense. But as I mentioned before, I never read a young adult fiction novel. So that was it. So I researched let's say I chose 50 novels, and then I thought I think I can do this, So I wrote that, and that novel as a manuscript was nominated as Best German Debut.
Oh, nice.
So that was quite a leap all of a sudden from being unknown half bohemian
Right.
to in the spotlight all of a sudden of the all big publishing houses, right? And I
Right.
sold the film rights before I sold the novel, actually.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
So that sounds to me like that was the beginning of your more structured form of writing then. And you mentioned that you got like 15 YA novels and that and researched them. Did that inform you as to form of a YA novel? And like, did you begin to plot out your novel, or did I have to guess based on your responses so far that you are somebody that writes by the seat of their pants?
Yes, I know.
Okay.
You put it really well, actually.
Okay.
So I mentioned Victoria before, and in Victoria, I had the chance the first time in my life. I went to the immigration process and I wasn't allowed to work. Okay. That alone is not a problem for me personally. If it would be for finance.
Right.
But I ran into a film society. So you could volunteer there, and in return, you could borrow material and you went to workshops. One of the workshops of the many then that I took was story structure. And that was the first time actually that I heard about like that in a way that makes sense to me.
Right.
So I always told with the nomination of that novel, basically the next 10 years, I was a full-time author, right?
Okay.
So I always, in the interviews I said in Germany, I'm a German writer, but actually I'm a Canadian or North American author, if you want, or storyteller, because the very big tool was given to me in my second language, right? And now if you ask like, how do I plot? Yes, I do, but all my novels fit on one letter-sized paper.
Okay.
Like literally,
right.
I make a timeline and then I write pretty small with pencil and I plot like, I don't know, let's say 40 or 60, sentences or just like chapters.
Yep.
And I'm not the guy that writes a treatment and lets it grow into the novel, for example.
Okay. Yeah. So you work from like a one-page outline is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And so do you know the ending of your story before you start it?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I never, because for the most part of my life, I had to work jobs to buy myself time to write a novel. So that time was always really valuable. And I cannot sit down and just write into the blue and hope everything turns out fine. So I need a long time before I start actually a novel. That might be between 2 and 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 and 15 years. That's a pretty wide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how many books have you written now?
Around 14. I did also like 2 collaborations with other authors, one from Zimbabwe and another German. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll have to table that for some questions down the road.
Yeah.
So what genre do your stories fit into? Are they all over the place, or do you consider yourself primarily a action, thriller, horror? Like what do your stories fall into?
Yeah, that of course, that was always with my publishing houses. They wished, of course, I would write a second part or a third. And the genres are like, I have, let's say, a young adult fiction thriller, but for example, I Am You Am I, it's a buddy switch comedy. It's just for the laughs, right? And then I have Growler, half grizzly, half polar bear. That's a horror novel, probably as close to what Stephen King does. It was compared to in Germany, at least. And it is just fun. It is the best idea that catches me because I will eventually spend half a year or a year with the characters, right?
Okay. So all your books are standalone then? Did I understand that correctly?
They are standalone.
Okay.
And then again, I work with characters in different places in their lives. So you might find a protagonist, a main character popping up in another novel, but you don't need to know that. Yeah.
Right. So you've got sort of a loosely connected universe going on. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. So which book or novel would you be best known for?
It would be in Germany, at least. It would be the called Joyride Ost in German, and here it's For a Spin in English, the English version.
Okay,
that was the one that was nominated, and
Okay,
it's in 5th edition, and my young adult fiction books are read in school between Denmark and Italy in Europe.
Okay. Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And it's hard to stay on one track because I'm going through your CV here, and you've done so many different things.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So out of all the things that you've done, what do you find the hardest one to do?
The hardest one? That's a good question. I wrote a novel, a young adult fiction thriller, a locked room thriller called School Shooter. And I did extensive research for that, almost I wish I didn't, because it is a very dark theme, although the novel comes across with a certain verve, but I want to write about something I don't know. So I went through everything that there was available. And of course, if you think about children or youth, those things drag you down.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a lot like Stephen King's Rage, which he eventually pulled because he's worried about it being an accelerant for fueling that kind of behavior. So that's interesting. And you're currently working on another book that has an interesting title, and I don't know how dark it is. Maybe it's meant as a joke, but it's Suicide Hotel. Or is this a really grim kind of final resting place for people who are at the end of their line?
It's I don't know. One of the things that's one of those ideas that I carried around for over 12 years and formed itself. So I always had an eye open for things, and I forgot. I can't quote it now. Okay, don't quote me on this, but eventually by reading stuff, I even read like if a hotel is open for I think more than 6 years, you will sleep in a room somebody committed suicide. Oh, that was a very dark picture that I was like, oh my, is that statistically correct? Right? Yeah. But I took it to another level. So I should say it's a dystopian novel. It takes place in the far future. Okay. And I just don't want to talk too much about it because I'm in the midst of it. And I got this literary arts grant that pays me for a year to write that novel because it is very complex. And I document my journey in weekly blog posts on my homepage. What is also fun. And at the end, it will be your own project probably. Oh, cool. Okay. to document that. And
so you're tackling science fiction this time?
Yeah, I had one that was in German. There is no English version yet, The Drone Pilot, and this is actually in Germany in the province a mandatory read for high school. So in English language arts they have to read 1984, and in German they have to read my novel. Wow. For the next 2 years. Oh, wow. They have to. It is. So and that was in the near future, and Suicide Hotel will take place in 2112.
2112.
So that is it. Yeah, so it's social science fiction.
Yeah, 2112. That's a Rush album. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I don't know if you're familiar with that group, but the Canadian rock band.
Yeah, with the group. Yeah, not with the album.
Oh, yeah, 2112. Yeah, that's you should listen to that. Maybe you shouldn't until you're done your book. But
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Okay, so I've noticed cropping up through your resume, you've done a lot of your work through grants, through educational institutions. Is that How did you fall into that?
Again, I go just briefly back to Victoria. I ran into artists that were well established, and basically they were older artists, and they told me, you as an artist, you should look into that, into possibly grants. You won't get every grant, right? But maybe every third or fourth. And in this case, like I applied, I think 4 times in my time during my time here, and now I got it, right? So 3 times you work a week or 2 weeks if you want to do it properly for nothing, or you lay the groundwork to maybe come with the right project at the right time, a little luck, and then you get it, right? And in Germany, it was pretty much the same. Okay. Yeah. It was one of the legs I was standing on. Yeah.
Right. So in the case of Suicide Hotel, what was the criteria for presenting your story to them? Like, how much did you have to show them that you had so much written, or do you just have to give them this outline? Or
so they definitely want to know, we talk about, it's a lot of money, I think, for especially for artists, right? Like, and so I wrote the first 20 pages, I believe, and an outline that I just do. The outlines I literally just write for grant proposals, right? Otherwise I work with my page. So for that, and then I also made a case. This is an important novel for the society, for today, for the future, and for me as an artist, as a writer today. and as a stepstone for my career.
Okay.
So you have to kind of, for 2 weeks, a full time, that should take your grant proposals. Yeah. To really properly do it. Yeah.
Right. And I don't know how the process works normally, but I guess over the last year when you were doing this during the COVID times, this must have all been done remotely. Can people do this through just through emails and mail, or do you have to actually go to some location and formally present what you're going to do?
No, grant proposals as well in Germany as the one here is really all online. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's anonymous, so you don't hear who the jurors are. So, I mean,
okay.
So you can't take influence and those things.
And if for any writers out there who might be listening to this, especially in the Alberta province or anywhere in Canada, is there like a go-to website for finding out where to find out what grants are available for authors to apply to?
Yeah, so all the provinces have their own grants, and also there's the Canada Council for the Arts that is Canada-wide. That's a federal grant.
Okay.
And I got the provincial grant for the Alberta Foundation for the Arts.
Okay.
In the literary.
Yeah. Okay. And how many grants do they give out for like the particular program you're in? Is it a handful, or is it one, or like?
No, it's more than one, but I don't know how many.
Okay.
I know in Germany it was also like I got one literary award that was biannual. And they even wrote down, and they did it in the past, if we don't see one fit, we don't give it out.
Okay.
So that can I'm pretty sure that they have a budget, and then they have, for example, they have the literary arts, the theater, I believe, film, and also visual arts and all the others.
Right. So what's your contractual, I assume you signed some sort of contract with them, or is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. What's
your contractual obligations to them? Do they expect a completed work by a certain date, or?
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty much like as if you would say sign a contract with a publishing house where you have a deadline, and I put that in my proposal as well. I said, like, I have family. I can't quit my job and work 6 months. I have to keep my part-time job and have to work for 12 months. Okay. So I want to have it spread out. Right. So, and now I'm almost half a year in almost, right? It's February where it's then due.
Oh, okay. And what will happen to the story when it's completed and handed into it? Do they publish it through their in-house press, or is it?
No, they don't have an in-house press. That would be then again on me.
Okay.
While, of course, having kind of the stamp, in Germany it was that way too, right? Like if you have, so somebody likes your idea a lot already, right? A lot. So I'm sure publishing house take a closer look to things that are funded.
Okay. And just to be clear, so is it up to you to publish the book then, or?
I will look for an agent or for a publishing house probably this year already.
Okay.
So by the time it is ready, I polish this again, like the first 20 pages or, and the concept maybe in October, or I believe for my own little timeline that I made for myself. And try to approach the possible interest people. Yeah.
I'm sorry for all the questions, but you're the first writer I've had on who's writing their novel under these conditions. So I'm sure the listeners are very interested.
No, that's great. Yeah. Dig deep.
So, So with your other books, let's just focus on the ones that you've had done in Canada. Have you gone through traditional publishing, or do you do it through Amazon or some sort of ebook? Are you self-published? Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, for me, it was like, I made the decision I was about 23, basically, when I said, like, I will work so I can, to buy myself time to write. And that was, I always say, it was a lifestyle decision more than saying, like, I will become a professional author, because that is not possible in art, that you can say, like, in 5 years, I am this or something. So the same thing is, like, that's why I write always the idea that is the best, that might not be the best for the market, right? I had agents approaching me, I should write a rom-com because I can be funny and all that. And I said, I don't say no, but I haven't yet the idea, that sets it apart from the other ones. So at the end of the day, half of my novels are traditionally published in for example, in Germany, it's, for example, Rowohlt Verlag. You see Richard Ford there and Hemingway and those guys. And on Mixed Vision, it's a young adult fiction oriented publishing house that wins award every year. And the other half I publish myself.
Okay. And you just put it up on Amazon or Kobo or whatnot?
Yeah, exactly. Amazon, in Germany, there were other providers that then spread it on the different formats and stuff in the past. I mean, you talk to a guy that my first short stories that we mentioned, right? With 17, 18, I stapled them. I made this little chapbooks, right? And I went on readings in coffee houses and sold them for $2. Okay. Like, so for me, self-publishing is
right. Okay, that's so you've covered the whole spectrum of publishing too, from a basement operation to And that's self-publishing is becoming so common nowadays because it's becoming so much easier to do, and plus you get to bypass all the gates that stand in the way of traditional publishing as well. So, do you do audio editions of your books?
Yeah, I personally, I loved radio when I was a teenager, and I started to love music. I was that kid that, although I had to go to school the next day, I listened from midnight to 2 a.m. to my favorite DJ, for example, and so radio was always there. I worked in radio as well later on. So and I did also my first audio recording of short stories and poetry during that time. And now with Audible, for example, it's at least like I think if you have a good story, it's pretty easy to find really, really great performers that will perform your book, and you just say, let's do 50-50. We both had our work, and it's a pretty easy setup. And I really love the versions like Derailed, The Locomotive is as an English audiobook, and I Am You Am I. So that young adult fiction book with the Buddy Switch is written in 2 first-person narratives. Okay. So from the girl and from the boy. And Casey Hallowell, the actress that spoke it is unbelievable. She does the switch hilariously. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because audiobooks are really ramping up in readership or listeningship, I guess I could say. That I know for some authors it comprises the largest portion of their income stream. I'm curious if that's true for you as well.
No, that is not yet. But okay. I think like there's so much noise out there. It's like how do you discover today?
That's right. Yeah.
Something if you want to go you want to go back to me stapling my little chapbooks, it's like, well, I ran them through town and stapled my posters of me reading the next day in the coffee house all over the place, right? So, and then at least in my hometown, everybody knew because everybody goes to work and to shopping, right? So you had your 40 people. That is not that easy anymore, actually.
Right. So a little more in your writing process then. So you complete your first draft, and then I assume you do a second draft, and then you send it out. Do you have beta readers? Like how do you do that? How do you get feedback?
Yeah. So if my first draft, I would do the little switch between German and English. I must say, in the first draft in German was literally the end draft, and I had to just proofread it, right? In English, it is a little bit more complicated, as you can imagine, if it's your second language and you hear me. It's about grammar, getting the right word at the right time, and the rhythm, right? So I factored that in, and I also factored that into my grant, for example. And I said, like, well, for 4 months, that's all I want to do. I want to file with the language, like file the sentences, the structure, the chapters. And that's basically, I think the first version so far, I'm really happy with it. And I hope it pans out pretty much the same way that I think nobody would say you wrote a second version where you throw out 40 pages and write another 60 in. That never happened. Yeah.
Right. So do you have, let's talk about the grammar first, because you mentioned, because English is your second language. How do you do the grammar? Do you have somebody proofread it for you, or do you use any software tools? Like I know there's some software tools are getting better. Pro Writing Aid. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
I don't. What do you write with Word or Scrivener or?
It's funny. I don't know. I just had the question the other day with what I write, and so I wrote pretty much with everything but with Word.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I write a lot with Open Office. It's just like, because it was free.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
And here I do have Pro Writing Aid, where I can kind of, I call it always a dialogue with myself.
Right.
Where it's like, okay, you get a suggestion. Is that better? Is that worse? Is there, in German, I had a Papyrus. Papyrus is
okay,
and they also now have an English version, but I haven't tested it yet. Oh, right, my last blog post is about exactly that from last week. Yeah, I was just like, why is that so familiar? Yeah, so I might try the Papyrus because it has all these features that you probably as a like writing aid and the Scrivener and so on. But I don't just accept everything because there are many things that are the way they're supposed to be, right? Like I also now with the dystopian novel, I make up a lot of words, right? I just say like, well, I have the freedom. It's like many years from now. So but I love that process. By the way, because you asked for the plotting, right? So I probably have 40 books, like nonfiction books about writing, and I almost I see them as colleagues. I always go back at them, look at them, like almost like getting feedback. Did I think of everything? Is there something I haven't thought of? And I really like that process. And that maybe also that's why it takes at least 2 years for a novel for me to start.
Right. So you actually enjoy the revision process?
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Today I heard a colleague, I don't like editing. And for me, it's almost like, like then to dive in and kneel down and see that you maybe planned little things that you did like clumsily maybe in the first draft.
Right.
Then you just pepper them all over I love that process. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's where the work really comes alive, and you can really make the proper emphasis. And that's also, I think, where, if you weren't aware of it at the beginning, that's where your theme will come to you. Though a lot of times writers said they didn't even realize they had this theme in their story until somebody told them that they did. Do you write with a theme in mind, or are you character based?
Yeah, characters are so important, and that's also why it takes so long, because I'm not starting a novel before I hear them talk, basically, before I know what the narration voice is and who it is and where they stand on everything. Right. That's why it's, for me then, once I start, such a joy to live then through these, let's say, hook lines, basically, for each chapter. If I say, for example, and I always take that example with that first young adult fiction novel, the two kids steal a car. That was my hook line for that chapter. I did not know it was a gas station or the BMW or whatever happened there, and that what makes it juicy. But I know Tarek, the main character, and he tells a story and how he thinks and how he feels about everything. Right. That's just circling back again. So do you have beta readers? Yeah, the beta readers. It's fun. In Germany, I probably will do this with this novel here as well, but not many. I want to get certain input. In Germany, it was like established like old friends, sort of, or colleagues sometimes. Okay. And for example, I say like my one buddy, and he's working in a factory, right? The only books he ever read after leaving school were mine. Oh, wow. So but his input, because he has a different view on everything than, and really, I suggest that to everybody, somebody that has nothing to do with literature and is not into these classical narration. And he pointed those little things out, like that football fan would never wear that or whatever. And I'm like, really? Like those things. Right. That's needs to a nice little segue about you mentioned earlier that you had done a couple of collaborations. And if I heard you correctly, you did something with somebody from Africa? Yeah. So that came about, like how is that happening? So it was with the author Blessing Musariri, and she's from Harare in Zimbabwe. And we met at a paid writers retreat in Denmark. That was also one of those things where you apply. And I forgot, we got, I don't know, I just say now, I don't know, $1,000 or $2,000. Everything was paid. They, want that you talk to the people there and to do a reading, and you can write the project you suggested. So, and they were like, they had 4 or 5 like from East India, Latvia, Germany, and Zimbabwe, and 10 Danish writers. So we all lived in this old hunting castle, beautiful, and everybody had a little room. Nothing, just a little room and one community kitchen. Now everybody that writes, that's your dream, right? Like at the end of a day, you have a chat with people, and of course a glass of wine or beer. And Blessing was this absolute natural storyteller, even under storyteller conditions, right? So, and everybody glued to her lips when she was telling stories. And then we had that reading day, and she read her poetry. And the poetry was really dark and serious and stern. And I approached her like, Blessing, that's not like who you are. Oh, yeah, sure, that's how I am. I'm like, I can't make an answer. And I'm like, no, you should, do something like a young adult fiction book. And she said, no. And then it was a year later, and I get an email, and she said, Thorsten, I can't forget what you said, how are you doing? And and then we just shot back and forth an idea that grew into a moment where we said, let's do this. Yeah.
Okay. And what was that book about? And what was it called?
It's called My Totem Came Calling. It's published in Canada, traditionally published. And the CBC also put it on the top 30 list in end of 2019 when everybody went into COVID mode.
Right.
But it is about Harare girl that is rich, but she starts seeing the totem of her family. And she's scared of the doctors, and the parents want to send her to South Africa and all that jazz. And eventually she just decides to go on a road trip to see where the roots are. So it's kind of,
Okay. Interesting. And how did that collaboration work? Like, did you both write the same character, or did you alternate chapters, or did you?
Yeah.
One would write a chapter and the next person would go through and make a pass through it and maybe just tweak it a bit?
I think if you have 2 different characters and voices, that is okay. But I wrote a novel with Kersten Flenter in Germany, and there we established basically at the end, you want to have one voice. So it could be the mixed voice. So what it was, and Blessing and me agreed on that too. One, I think it was me, she wrote a couple of like just scenes, but just like a few, as far as I remember. And then she said like, I'm busy with something else. And then I said, you know what? I just write a really quick, dirty first version, like 100 pages, 110 or whatever it was. Right. And then I sent it to her. And then of course, like she's again, like my English also grew, of course, with that project. Right. I didn't take it on alone. She gave me the free. She knew who I was and everything. And then we had a couple of good chuckles about my English, and she added her again. And that was the time where we did work with a little treatment that we also mold bigger and bigger until we said like, now it's time for the novel, because you have a collaboration going. You need a working paper basically. Right. But it's fun.
Yeah. So you like collaborating?
I like collaborating. That's why I also like when I do movie making, filmmaking, right? Like you have a lot. It's an aspect I really enjoy, and with the right person, it's very, you grow from each other, right? And you have to put your ego maybe a little bit on the back burner, but beautiful things happen. It's like if you know. So.
Right. That's such a different experience for a writer as opposed to somebody working on like a film or music or whatever. Yeah. So where you're much more on your own and you're basically the god.
Literally everything can happen. Yeah. Anything.
Yeah. Okay. So that's very cool. And so you're currently working on your Suicide Hotel project, and you said that you're scheduled to have that done by February, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And are you thinking beyond that as to what you're going to do next yet, or?
Yeah, that was always the case, right? Like when I have a binder full of ideas, right, that I
Oh, okay.
that constantly grows, and then you amalgam a few ideas and things happening.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I never, once I sit down with one project, of course, other things come up, especially over a
Right.
year. Oh, this would be great. And I know many colleagues that then abandon the project and start the next one
Mm-hmm.
without having finished. I never did that. I think that has to do with my upbringing, to finish what you start. What is actually
Okay.
a good one, actually. So
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
glad, I'm glad about that.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be everything good, but you finish stuff, and I think that's
Right.
good for the soul too.
Absolutely.
So yes, you ask, like, is there something loosely on my mind? It is,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely won't spend like time in developing anything.
Right.
Having said that, it might be that I visit the location next week just for a photo shoot. Just
Right.
for example, I will take photos for my grant proposal then.
Ah, I see.
Where I want, because it is really a real place that does exist, and I do street photography. That's my hobby, right? I don't pursue anything with it.
Okay.
Probably my way of coming to terms with life or reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I take the camera there and for half a day stroll around there and then see what happens next year.
Okay. Did I hear you correctly saying that you're going to apply for a grant for this next project as well?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Because yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I think that's, well, I could talk to you about a lot of other things, but we've been going at this for quite a while. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity at this time to talk about anything that hasn't come up during the course of the podcast or the interview so far.
Maybe it came up passively because you touched on the different medias I'm working with,
Mm-hmm.
and I mentioned now street photography. I did documentary filmmaking and also narrative filmmaking. And for me, always, or audio books. I also spoke myself, and theater and film screenplay writing, and all
Mm-hmm.
these things for me fertilize each other. I don't see. I always learned one thing that I put in the next thing, and for example, thinking about to do a radio play. That's always my example.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell your story just in audio,
Right.
and then, without just telling the people all the time what happens. And
yeah,
I like those challenges too. And they come back to the novel,
right,
where it's like, how does this sound? How does it smell? Right? The feelings, the senses, right? Like,
yeah. That's very important to get all those the senses in there.
Yeah.
One question I always like to ask writers, especially because of the strange times that we've been living through, like with the COVID lockdown and everything.
Yeah.
How did that affect you? Did you, because I've talked to several writers about this, and there's been a spectrum of reactions to it. I'm curious as to how you handled that. Did it knock your socks off, or did you just power through it and keep working? How did that affect you?
It's a good question. So it would have knocked my socks off probably in Germany as a full-time writer, because, like, let's say 20%, 30% of my income were readings at schools, for example.
Oh, okay. Right.
I toured between Denmark and Italy repeatedly, and more than 2,000 readings. And so that, I know my colleagues, nobody could do a reading, and that hurt them badly, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, now being here during that time, I was not a professional full-time author anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I had more freedom. I had the talks here with artists and writers and fellows. And I said, like, it's funny, I can't sit down, although the time is there, to write a novel or a long piece, because it's almost like I had temporary attention deficit syndrome, if you want. So my mind wandered away when it was longer than a poem or a song. And I wrote somewhere about over 100 songs and poems.
Wow.
During last year. In my feeling, like at December last year, when somebody asked me, so what did you do? And I was like, I felt like I didn't do anything until I sat down and actually saw all my handwritten poetry and started basically transcribing them into the computer.
Okay. And I'm curious, because your current project is Suicide Hotel, has the COVID lockdown played into that, you think, anyway, to the story that you were doing? Did it change what you were going to write, or you kept it separate?
Yeah, no, definitely not at all. There is a temptation then to put in a virus that is now, I bet those novels will come out, right? Where there are viruses on the side, even just in the normal, you know?
Yeah.
So I stray away from that. My application was even older than COVID. You know, it always takes a while until you hear back. And there was a political change here. So they axed one grant generation basically, and then you could reapply. That was then already like a year later. So it had no, and it has no effect whatsoever. I always, like in the past, it was also on purpose, like let's say with 9/11, for example, one of those traumatic events in the world. I stay away for at least 3-5 years from the theme at all, right? Like I don't want to even think of it because things are too fresh and your feelings too tainted.
Right. Okay, very good. If people want to find your books and that, where's the best place to go?
I would check my homepage because they are listed there. And I don't know if you're into other stuff or you're just curious now, what else is he doing?
Sure.
It's just my name in one word.com, Thorsten Nesch. Okay.
And they'll find links to where to get your books and things like that there as well? Or where should they go for that?
Yeah, no, they find the links there. They also can listen into the audiobooks there. So I have the live links there and all the other jazz. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So yeah, I see you have a shop page there as well. And that's great. And I think that's everything. I wish you the best of luck with the rest of the time that you have to work on your book. And when you get it done, maybe you can come back on and tell us how things turned out for you.
Oh, that would be fantastic, Lou. Thanks for having me, man.
Not a problem. And you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.
Okay. Take care now.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.